Well, hello to another episode of Interesting People, Irrelevant Conversations. And I'm excited. So today's guest is my friend Alyssa, who I have known for, oh my gosh, probably 20 years, but she is coming to us from a campsite. So this will be really fun. She is living the nomadic digital lifestyle. So you guys will get to hear a little bit more about that. And we're going to hopefully, all service and everything with her being outside will still work well. But let me introduce you to her very quickly before we find out what our irrelevant question of the day will be. She is a retired public school teacher and a leader who's continuing her leadership by working at various private universities. And so her experience, she has taught at all levels of public schools, providing leadership at district, state, universities. She really has a depth of experience in curriculum and instruction. And this has allowed her to develop support systems that really help further the educational experiences of those that she works with. And this is really cool. One of her proudest accomplishments is that she was selected by the 2024 graduating class of Strive Prep High School, which is in Denver, as the faculty member that actually handed out the diplomas to the seniors as they crossed the stage at the end of the year. So that's pretty cool to
Mm.
have them want to say, we want you to be the last teacher that we remember that hands us that. That's a pretty cool impact that you've had on those students. So we're going to go ahead and share our wheel of questions. We will see what pops up as our irrelevant question today. Are you ready?
I'm ready. You know how I love spontaneity. I'm here for it.
Okay, let's see. Ready, guys? All right. So our wheel is spinning, and some of our questions were given by other people, some are not. So we'll see which one pops up. And our question is this was from Yvonne McHugh.
Mhm.
So great question, Yvonne. What would you do all over again? So, what would you do in life all over again if you could?
Yeah, so a form of this question, thank you for having me, by the way. It's so exciting. Um, I've actually answered quite a few times, just a little bit differently, which is what stage of your life would you go back to if you could, which is kind of the same thing. What would you do all over again? I'm not going to like address this from a, hey, something I messed up and want to do differently, although some people would. So the phase of my life or what I would do over again is like my college undergraduate 4 years. So I went to school in Boulder, University of Colorado, go Buffs. Um, and it was without a doubt the most fun time of my entire life. You know, you're 19, 20, 21, 22, you're away from home, you really don't have any responsibilities. School was not that hard for me, so that was lucky. You don't have very many debts. You're in that phase of your life where you're building relationships with people that are maybe different from people you experienced, particularly if you stayed in one place your whole life growing up, which I mostly did. And I got my elementary teaching license, and it was so easy. We used to do like our homework was make a poster of, I don't know, ways to represent adding 2 plus 2. So I took like my poster board and my scissors and my glue and my magazines over the house that we used to all kind of hang out at the party house. It was all engineers. And I'd be sitting there cutting out magazines, making my poster, and they're like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm doing my homework," and they're doing this really in-depth. I don't know what they were doing. It's like a totally different language, and
So
they're
you're
like,
like
"Oh
doing
my,
kindergarten crafts, and
oh yeah,
they're
yeah, 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 exactly." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm done. Let's go down to the bar. Let's go do what you do when you're in college." They're like, "What are you kidding? We still have all this work to do." And I told them, I said, "You check me in about 20 years because you're going to be making a lot more money than I do," which is true. But it was just so fun going to football games, being in Boulder, having not much responsibility. I'm going to pause because there's a little like truck going behind me. Might make some noise. Sorry, campground life.
okay.
And so, I mean, I would just go back to that part of my life because it was so fun. I just had a great time.
Huh. See, and it's so interesting. I had such a complete different college experience. I hated college and I graduated in 3 years just to get out of there. And so it's so interesting to me, right? Like people always talk about, oh, college was the best time of my life and I loved it. And I loved my degree. I went for a theater degree. I loved my program. I got to study at the National Theater Institute for a semester. I actually loved the classes, which was really funny. When I went to graduate early, I had one of my professors say to me, she's like, "Why are you graduating early? You're like a straight A student." And I said, "Oh, I would stay here for the classes. I loved learning." I said, "I just hate college and I hated the environment, the college life. Like I think I came out of the womb as an adult. I never partied. I was like not into that scene. I wasn't fun. Like I guess you have to be fun to like college, and I was boring and not fun." And so I just never really got into that. And I also didn't like, and maybe it was different because you were in Boulder. So I will say, this is, I'd be curious other people's experience. So if you're listening, I'd love to know, did you love college and hate college? And did you go to a small school or a big school? Because, University of Boulder is huge, right? So I think you're really treated like an adult. Where I went to a school that had about 6,000 people. And I mean, we had classes that took attendance, so it was much more uh it was a smaller school, which there was some benefit of that. I knew all my professors, I knew them by name, they knew me. But the whole college living in a dorm and the amount of control that the school had on you, I was like this, I'm an adult and I don't want to be treated like a kid. And I didn't like all the rules. And it wasn't that I was a bad kid who wanted to break the rules. I just didn't like the rules. And I remember calling my dad the middle of my junior year, and I was like, I want to quit. I hate school. I had come back from the National Theater Institute. I was like, I hate this. I cannot spend another semester here. I can't come in back for another year. I'll just die. Right. And of course, it was so dramatic. I'm going to die. I can't come back another year. And he was like, well, we just spent now, guys, this is like years and years and years ago, right? So he was like, we just spent $75,000 on your 3 years of college or whatever it was. Now that would be like 1 year, right? But he's like, we just spent like $75,000 on your college. And so you're either going to go back for another year or you're going to figure out how to graduate. And so I thought, okay, challenge accepted. And then I graduated at the end of my junior year and I was like, peace out. So I wonder if it's because it was if I had been in a larger school, if maybe I wouldn't have had that experience.
Oh yeah, mine was totally different. We had classes of like 600 people. I lived off campus in a one-bedroom apartment, which I loved. And I could walk to campus and walk to Pearl Street Mall, which if anybody's listening is super familiar with Boulder, that's where everybody goes and hangs out and does the college thing. So yes, very different. And that makes sense. You're right. Not everybody has a solid, even educational experience that they'd want to go back to.
What made you pick your college? How did you choose there?
My freshman year, I thought I was going to go into hotel restaurant management. And so I went to University of Denver, which is a very prestigious private school in Denver, like actually very close to the city. And I drove back and forth from school to home. I didn't live on campus. And I didn't like it there. I didn't feel welcome there. It's very Greek. I don't do sororities and fraternities. It's just not my thing. And so I didn't really feel plugged into the university. And I wasn't having fun. It was boring. And if you grow up in Colorado or pretty much anywhere, CU Boulder it's a party school. And so I was like, oh, I'll just transfer to Boulder. It'll be fine. I'll figure out what I'm going to do because I did not have a career path when I first transferred there. It was close enough to home, but far enough from home. I didn't have to live on campus because I was already a sophomore when I transferred. So, I mean, it all worked out. But I
Oh
went
my
because I was like,
gosh.
oh, I want to have fun. This is the party school. This is where I'm going.
Oh my gosh. So this is so funny because most people would be like the opposite, right? Like, I want to get into the prestigious school. You were like, I'm going to screw this. I'm going to go just have a great time. Well, and I do think, we've had a lot of conversations because, my daughter's starting college next year.
That's right.
And looking at what some of her friends are taking out in college debt. And she's also a kid who's like, I don't really know what I want to do. Right. And so talking about you're going to spend all this money and you don't really know what you want to do, where at least, well, let me ask you, did you know you wanted to do education? Because at least then if you're like, okay, I'm going for something like teaching, I know when I graduate, I'm going to be a teacher. Right.
That's actually a great question. My mom was a teacher, and so I was not going to be a teacher. I was like, I'm not going to be a teacher because my mom was a teacher and I want to forge my own path and I want to do my own thing. And so, no, I was not going when I originally, obviously, hotel restaurant management. And then when I transferred to Boulder, I didn't really know what I was going to do. I just wasn't going to be a teacher.
Okay, so then how
That's
did you
obviously
end up
not.
on that
Yeah, yeah.
path?
No, that's a great question. So I'll just give a little context. I, by trade, and spent most of my time as a special education teacher. And so your podcast listeners will know that most people who are special education teachers either have someone in their family or someone in their circle who had a
Yeah.
disability or an experience when they were young or something like that that sort of led them down the path to want to be a special education teacher. And that's exactly what happened to me. Um, I was in middle school, and I talked earlier about how school was really easy for me. So I was sort of that problem kid because I was bored, super bored in middle school. And they started this new program where they took like 5 or 6 or 7 kids, you call us typical kids, and they taught us about, they pulled us out of class. It was an elective in your schedule, and they taught us about different disabilities. And then the next semester, we had kids our age at that school who had the same disabilities, and they put us in PE together. It was called PE Plus. And so it was like in the early 80s, and it was sort of the first attempts at what we now call inclusion, where all students are involved in all different experiences, not in separate rooms or separate schools or separate facilities. And I think that just really stuck with me because when I moved to Boulder, I started working at the YMCA supporting kids with disabilities. And it just kind of
Huh.
stuck. Um, and so then I just decided I'd go into education.
It's so interesting. We don't think often that these seemingly insignificant things that happen to us growing up have such impact on where they take us and where our life will go, good or bad, right? Like something can happen to you when you're really young that just so sticks with you that it causes like a wound that you carry the rest of your life, right? And you see adults still dealing with things that happened when they were, 10, 13 years old. But then on the other hand, you can have something like this where you're like, I didn't even realize that was making such a significant difference. I had a guest on talking about she's not a reader, and she talked about her favorite book, and I want to say it was American Psycho, and how I just thought that was so weird. And she had no idea what she wanted to do. Turns out she became a psychotherapist, and I was like, well, that's interesting. Maybe that was like a insight into the fact that you were fascinated by the human mind, right? And so for you, it's maybe being fascinated by uh you know, working with these kids and how that eventually was going to turn into your career path. But I do want to, this is not on your question, but I think this is fun to talk about because so Alyssa and I met each other about 20 years ago, literally randomly at a Staples. And so we've been friends for a very long time. I've seen her daughter grow up. I think your daughter was like 7 when we met, or 6 or something. She knew me, I think, before I had Emily. And so now we both don't live in Colorado anymore, but now you are just a nomad. Like sold your house, sold all your stuff, and are living around the country. So I know she kind of keeps dancing around. She's actually coming in from a campground. And so I know she's got stuff going on behind her. We're good. We're nothing that we can see on our end. But I think so many people want to do what you're doing, dream about doing what you're doing, or saying, oh, one day I would love to do that, but don't actually ever take that jump.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about what made you and your husband say, okay, we're going to do this. And what
Yeah.
was it scary? Like giving up your house and being like, now we have no place to go. Like, and what has
Yeah.
it been like as you're traveling around the country?
Yeah. So, if anybody's watching, you just mentioned it. I kind of keep looking behind me. It's because Lawnmower Guy has posted up behind me. Here's one of the things I'll tell you about living this lifestyle, is that someone's either always leaf blowing, power washing, or mowing their lawn, or the grass that's around. And I have the sneaky suspicion he's going to turn his mower on. So
I mean, yeah.
I know
So,
we'll
and you
address
say this
that.
in a campsite. So you're staying in these campsites where there's constantly landscaping
Oh,
going on.
yes. Yes, it's always that. Um, and so if he does turn it on and he's literally right behind me, you and I will formulate a plan, but I'll just keep talking. So we actually purchased our first camper, gosh, many, many, many years ago, real simple. Didn't have a bathroom, didn't have a shower, uh, it didn't have an air conditioner. And we kept that little yellow camper for about 10 years. And our trips got progressively longer. We do a weekend and then we do 2 weeks, and things like that. And so we just sort of
Without the bathroom.
evolved.
I just want to preface that
Oh,
one didn't
well,
have a
for first
bathroom.
the 10 years without the bathroom, yes. And you and I were very close together at that point. This is when our lives really intersected. And so, yeah, you would have been like, this is the time when you wouldn't even drive to the mountains. Remember, you were
Yeah,
like,
no.
someone has to drive me up I-70,
Do you
which was
remember that?
hilarious.
Yeah. So I moved to
Oh, yeah.
Colorado, guys. I was afraid to drive in the mountains. So when we had to go do things, I would have other people drive because I was like too scared. Those roads were crazy. And I grew up in
Uh-huh.
Jersey on the Jersey Turnpike. And I was like, nope, I am not driving in these mountains. Yeah.
That's right.
Oh yeah.
So we just progressively got more sophisticated campers, we'll say, and took longer and longer trips. And as we got about 5 years away from me retiring, which was not necessarily 5 years ago, but oh, he's moving on, thank gosh. We started talking about this. We were like, let's take longer trips. And so we took about a 4-week trip from Colorado to the Pacific Northwest. And I remember being really nervous. What if we run out of cotton balls? What if we, note to self, you can buy cotton balls almost anywhere. And so it was good that we did these little practice trips. And we just started talking more and more about just wanting to do this more long term. So we started talking about this about 3 years, like really talking about going full time about 3 years before I retired. We started doing what we called the mini purge. We had a 2,600 square foot house just outside of Denver that I had been in, like you were talking about Emma, since Emma was 4. And, I'm not a minimalist. And I think this is a wildly weird American phenomenon is we buy a big house and then we think we have to fill it with things. Note to self, please don't do that. If you're a young listener and you just bought a house, don't fill it with stuff. So we just started doing the mini purge, and then things happen at my work site that caused me to accelerate my retirement. So we actually, and I say we retired because I've been married for a while, we're a team. People go, your husband retired too? I'm like, no, we're a team. So then accelerated
Hold on.
us.
Hold on.
We
We're
had to
gonna have
start
to
really getting
we're gonna have to
really
pause. You're
fast.
frozen,
And you talked
Alyssa.
about
Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Can you hear me?
fears and what was hard about it. And what was
Alyssa,
really
you're
hard about
frozen.
it was purging the house and deciding what to get
Hold
rid
on.
of
Can you hear
and
me? Can you hear me?
deciding what to
Or can you hear?
store.
No, you can't hear me.
And there
Okay,
are
can you hear me
things in a
yet?
house that aren't important. And
Alyssa,
there
can
are,
you hear me? Can you hear me?
yep.
Okay, you were frozen, so you're gonna have to go back. I had a pause.
Yep.
Okay, you're still frozen on camera. Wait, well, let's wait.
Where's a good spot to pick up?
So let's go back to, let me think. All right, let's wait till you come back in. Okay. I think let's go back to, we started with these like a mini purge. And then you were talking about, it was really
Mm-hmm.
scary with the cotton balls. And then you had just started, let's go back to something
Mm-hmm.
happened at your job that made you take an early retirement. But I want to wait until you're back in
Okay.
clear because you're still pixelated. And so what happened
Yeah,
was
I
you
don't
were
know if
completely frozen. Your audio was okay. I could hear you. You couldn't hear me because I kept saying, wait, pause, but it didn't seem like you could see me or hear me.
yep. Let me disconnect and reconnect.
Now you're okay. Maybe not. Now you're frozen again. Okay, let's see if you try talking now.
Is it better? I'm on the wrong
Now you're
internet.
okay. You're what?
Okay.
Now
I'm
you
on
seem
the
okay. Okay,
campground
so go.
Wi-Fi, but
Okay.
okay.
Nope, you're
Yep.
okay now.
Okay. So, okay.
Hold on.
We'll
Let me
stick
get.
with this.
Can you see me?
Yes, and I can hear you
Okay.
too.
So when I go like this, I'll say like start again. So let's go back to because I'll have to hit unpause and then give it a second to kind of load back up. Go back to something happened that so we've been wanting to do this, but then something happened that made me want to retire. Okay, ready? Okay, we're back.
And so something happened at the last job I left, I was an assistant.
No, we lost you. Okay, so we're back.
So yeah, sorry, campground Wi-Fi, Wyoming wind. Um, so some things happened at the last school that I worked at, and I decided to look into early retirement, and we're able to do that, which was great, right? I wasn't having a great time at work anymore, and so we retired early. But what that meant is we had to get everything out of the house a year earlier than we were anticipating because we were committed and we were selling the house. And so I would say that time from November through mid-January, before we put our house on the market, was extremely stressful.
Hmm.
This is when you're walking around your house and you're like, where do I start? And what do I do with this picture? And what do I do with this keepsake? And what do I do with my kids' things? And my husband, he'll tell you he's a serial hobbyist. So we have beer making supplies, fly fishing supplies, Nerf guns, um, Legos. We had gotten really into Legos over
Oh my
COVID. And so
gosh.
we probably had 50 sets of Legos that weren't built and probably 75 sets that were built. And so it was just really, really hard because we committed we weren't going to keep anything. And the realtor said, empty your house. So we went from a 2,600 square foot house completely full to about 70 boxes and one rocking chair. And that is all we kept.
Wow.
So that was hard. And driving away from that house was hard. And I knew it would be. I knew it would be hard. Because, like you said, that's where my daughter, she was 4 when we moved in. You know, so many things happened in that house or affiliated with that house, animals that you keep that pass away that are
Yeah.
associated with that space is really, that was hard. Um, so I would say that was the hardest part of it. But so we've been on the road now since February. And so this recording, it's August 1st, right? Happens to be
Hmm.
happy Colorado Day. It's Colorado's birthday, by the way. And so we've been on the road almost officially 6 months now. Um, and I knew at about the 4 week mark, I would be like, because that's about when we would go home. Um, but it's been to be able to be in so many different places and see so many different landscapes and do so many different things. Um, I'm okay. We'll see. I think I'll be okay. We're on the road for 4 months and then we'll go back to Florida and have a couple of months where we just stay put and then we'll launch again.
Well, that was one of the questions I had asked before we started recording is kind of what your time frame is. And you had said we're committed for 2 years and then we'll kind of see where life takes us. What made you decide to give up the house and not just keep the house and still go and travel? Because, you know, hearing how difficult that was, which, I think for anybody who's grown up in a house and becomes your family home, that is really, it's where you remember all those big holidays and, events and things that happened. And I could see why that's challenging to say, "Hey, I'm just going to walk away from this part of my life."
Mm-hmm. I think a couple of things. I think one, it was a financial decision, and two, like we just don't want to have the ties. My husband has had rental property his whole life, and people are like, "You could rent this house," and it's true because it is in a very prime location, very close to the highway. It's a really nice house. Well, it's an accessible house, um, and we just didn't want to have that tie. You know, we
Huh.
didn't want to have to be like property management. Oh, the renters. Oh, the refrigerator broke. Oh, the whole point of this is to like not have those ties, right? So we went from 2,600 square feet to a 31-foot camper and a 10 by 10 storage shed.
Wow. If you guys didn't catch that, it was a 31-foot camper and a 10 by 10 storage unit. That is a lifestyle change for sure. And
Totally.
that's interesting. There is something about kind of cutting those ties and saying, I'm moving on to this new piece of my life, right? And not having that tie back for there. So I can
Mm-hmm,
appreciate that. Do you
mm-hmm,
think there's anything that for somebody who's thinking, I would really love to do this,
mm-hmm,
but I'm just nervous and I'm just scared. And we should preface that your husband does work remote, so he's still working, and they're not fully retired, and that you still work from the camper. And I think this is becoming a more feasible option for people as more and more, careers have remote options, right? And so for that person who's thought maybe I could never do this, it does become more realistic, I think, for people. But are there things that you feel like you wish you had known beforehand that you would have said, oh, we should have looked into this a little bit more before we took the leap?
Mm-hmm.
Because one thing you shared that I thought was really great is that you started with these smaller trips to kind of
Yes.
build up your muscle
Yes.
of, okay, can I really do this? Because I'm also thinking,
Yes.
could I really stay in a small pace with another person, just the two of us for that long?
Yes. Yeah, and that's exactly where I was going to go with that. Like we're in a bunch of groups of people who are full timers and things like that on Facebook, and for the most part, when I see people who are struggling, it's because they didn't plan it out, right? Or maybe they're like, "Hey, I just bought a camper. I'm going on the road." Like, whoa, there's a lot of in between. This is our fourth camper. So it's not like we haven't camped before, and we know what you need and what you don't need. You want to be thoughtful about like what lifestyle do you want to have. For us, knowing that my husband works full time, we need to have a dedicated space for him to work. So it's important that you, just like when you're buying a house, you have negotiables and non-negotiables. Maybe you want a two-car garage, maybe you want trees, maybe you don't want an HOA. It's the same with this. So you want to make sure that you're thinking about what lifestyle do you want to lead. There are so many different ways you can travel. You can be in a travel trailer like us. You can be in those big, they're called Class A's, they're like buses. You could be in a conversion van where you're in a van and all your stuff is there. There are lots of different ways you can do this. And so go to camp. I used to think this is weird. Big cities will have like, camping expos. Go to the
I went
camping
to
expo.
one. I went to one. It
Walk
was an
into the
RV
campers.
expo. Yeah,
Yes,
'cause I was like,
exactly.
well, so, my whole thing was when Emily graduated before, when I was kind of not in a relationship and everything, I was thinking, okay, I'm gonna go live in 8 different cities for her 8 semesters of college. That had been my goal that I had been planning on, and then I met Jack, and that kinda went in a different direction. But I've always been like, "Okay, could I do a camper?" I've never done that. So they actually had a big RV expo here in New Jersey. And I went and I brought my brother and sister-in-law came with me and the kids, and they were like, "Are you really thinking about doing this?" And you're right, it is really interesting because there were things that just from talking to the other people that you don't think about, you know, even things like how heavy it is to like drive one type of RV versus another one and the gas that's involved in that, or having to park it and then level it. And if you're doing it single by yourself versus if you're with somebody else. And so what I do think is pretty cool about the community, and you give a great tip of getting into Facebook groups with people who are doing this, is that I do feel like people who are in that community, they want to share what they've learned. They want to share their knowledge. They want to help that new person come along, because people were very open and generous with even just talking at the RV show about, and I'm not talking about the people working there. I'm just talking about the other attendees being like, "Hey, think about this," and "Hey, you should do this." And that was kind of cool. It also made me realize like how I was thinking a certain size, and then I was like, "Wow, I'm 5'10". This is not going to work for me. I am a big person. I feel claustrophobic in here." So even just being able to see that was good. What is your favorite part? Like, what is the best part about this for you guys?
I mean, we all have our own like personal things. I love national parks, national monuments. Um, and those aren't the only, there's a bunch of different things. So you might have listeners who know what a national passport book is. I should have got it. This is a cool little thing you can get through the national parks. I think it's nationalparks.org. And what it does is it tells you where all the national monuments are and national parks and national seashores, um, national wildlife refuges. And you take your little book and you walk into the visitor center, and there's this little place. It's called a cancellation location. And you open your little book to that page. So, for example, we just left Voyageurs National Park, which is in far north Minnesota. Across the river is Canada. And you open it up to Voyageurs National Park in your book, and you find the little stamp, and it has Voyageurs National Park. It gives you the date, and you put a little stamp in your book, and you get a sticker. And it's so silly, but I get goosebumps talking about it because I've had my national passport book for like 5 years now, and it is full of all these places that we have been to. And for me, that's what I'm revolving this around. I know I wanted to go to Voyageurs National Park, We're also going to Acadia National Park, which is way on the other side of the country in Maine. Um, and so I couldn't do those things having a house like tied down to a house. I didn't want that. My husband is really into fly fishing. So wherever we are, we're either in a fly fishing location or somewhere near a national park or a national monument. Um, and it just becomes then like this, like a diary sort of. I don't like to write a lot. It's like a diary of all the places you've been, and we can go through the book and go, oh my God, remember this when we were in
Oh,
Boston on whatever. And you can actually look at the date. Like a few years ago, we were in Boston and it was July 4th. Awesome, right? This year, every year, the National Park System picks uh, the 100th year anniversary of a particular area being a national monument park, whatever. And it happens to be Boston this year. We're going to be in Boston. So like I'm getting a special stamp because it's for the 100-year anniversary. It's real silly. But you just learn a lot of interesting things in places that you would not know existed if you didn't have this little book saying, hey, this is an important part of American history or unique to this area. Um, and so that, for me, that's what we kind of revolve around. I know it's silly, but that's what I like are my little national park stickers and stamps and that kind of stuff.
well, I think it's also what's kind of great about that is if you're somebody who's like, "Oh, I would like to do this, but I really don't know where I would go. I don't know where I would stay. I don't
Mm,
even know what's out there." This kind of gives you a little bit of a legit roadmap, like a literal roadmap, or
it
these are
does.
the places to go to and stay, which I think gives you almost a itinerary, right? Of where to
Yep.
go, at least as a starting point, which is really
Yeah.
cool. I've also heard there's a website where it's like kind of like Airbnb, but it's for RV, where it's people who have farmland or they have, like a vineyard or something, and you can
Yes.
just pay to park your RV there, which I thought was kind of wild.
Yes, I know this. It's called Harvest Host.
Oh, that's
And
right. That's what I've heard of it.
we've been Harvest Host members for about 4 years. And it is great. You pay a yearly fee. And so we were supposed to do a Harvest Host location last week in North Dakota, but it was 95 degrees. And most of these locations don't have electric to plug your rig into. And when you
Okay.
don't have that, you usually can't run your air conditioner unless you have a special configuration. So, but yes, we've done Harvest Host. You pay the yearly fee, and this little map pops up. It shows you where all the locations are. You communicate with them, and they say, sure, come on in. Most of them ask that you at least purchase something, whatever it is that they're selling, because this is about supporting small businesses. Another thing I love about being able to do this. So we've been to wineries, we've been to distilleries, we stayed at a farm in
Oh, how rough. I have to purchase
Ark.
wine. That would be tough for
Yeah,
me. Yeah.
rough, right? Arkansas, he had llamas and all kinds of stuff. We stayed at a winery in Illinois, and you basically just park in the parking lot. And so
Wow.
then we walked up to the winery and they were like, oh, we have wine slushies, but we close in like 15 minutes. And we're like, oh my gosh. And they said, you're our Harvest Host people, right? And we're like, yeah. They're like, here, just like 4 pitchers of wine slushies and then just leave them here tonight when you're all done. And so we just drank the wine slushies and put the empty pitchers up at like 11 o'clock and went to bed.
Okay, now you're getting into my kind of camping.
It's great. I do love Harvest Hosts are really, really great. It's just a really neat way to help people who are trying to like do their own thing and have something they're passionate about. And you brought up a good point about like having a launch off point. I think that's it. Like if you're going to do this lifestyle, what do you love to do? For my husband, it's fly fishing. We spent a month in Wisconsin, in a particular area of Wisconsin, because it's very known for fly fishing. So like I would think, what do you love to do? Do you like to bird watch? I don't know. Do you like to hike? Do you like to ride motorcycles? Do you like to cycle? Right. And
Yeah.
then weave that into where you're going and family. You can also visit family. People who have land in about 4 weeks, we're going to actually stay at a friend's house called boondocking. When you don't have any hookups, you can't plug in your electric, you can't plug in your water, nothing. You're just, you drive your camper into somebody's driveway or front yard and you live in their house for a week or however long they want you to live. Um, so there's just a lot of great benefits to being able to be where we want to be when we want to be there.
So, and I think what's really great about this is that often in life we're afraid to make changes because of the unknown and what's going to happen. And I think as humans, that's just a very natural, there's very few people I think who are really wired for the adventure. And we look at those people and we're inspired by them, really. Most people, they crave comfort, they crave familiarity, they crave like security, safety. So I
Mm-hmm.
think what's important in what you're doing is the reminding yourself that, hey, if this is something I've always wanted to do and I try it, I can change my mind. And so I love the idea of like take a month. Maybe you just do a month and you try it out. And if you decide at the end of the month you don't like it, guess what? You don't ever have to do it again. Right. But it's when we don't take the chance, when we don't step out of our comfort zone, when we don't pursue those little things that go, oh, I wonder if I could. Like, I think that's where this is kind of this joyless living, right? And this is where we, 30 years later go, wow, I wish I had, or what if I had, or, what if I had done? And I'm always impressed and admire people who say, I'm not sure if this is going to work out. I'm not sure if this is going to be something I'm going to love, but I'm willing to try it to see, you know? And I love that about what you guys are doing. And I've been following on your Facebook and seeing your different adventures. And would you guys agree, like listeners, isn't it's inspiring when people say, I have this dream to do something and they actually go and do that. And so if you have a dream that you're inspired to do, what could be the first step to getting you closer to trying that? And sometimes it's just that small step. It's like what she said, maybe it's just a weekend camping trip is your first step. And then maybe it's just a week or it's just a road trip or just taking tiny steps towards those bigger dreams. Because it's going to be pretty cool to see in 2 years. I'll be curious in 2 years if you guys say, okay, we're done, or you know what, we really love this. We're going to continue. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe you go international and you start to say, okay, we saw everything we want in the US and now we want to go see the rest of the world. I mean, there's just so many possibilities. I also
Mm-hmm.
think what's really good about what you're doing is that most people, there is a stat that most people live and die within so many miles of where they were born. And it really limits our exposure to other people and other cultures, even within our own country, other viewpoints. And I think you grow a tolerance and an acceptance and a more gracious, compassionate attitude when you're exposed to different parts of the country, different types of people, that your way is not always the right way. I saw a very interesting video. It was a guy, he was a European, and he was talking about how Europeans are so judgmental about Americans, that we are not, quote, traveled, right? And he said, I think this is because Europeans do not understand how big America is. He said, in my country, yes, I've been to, 7 countries because they're all within, 7 hours of me, right? He said there are states that you could drive 7 hours and you're still in the same state. He's like, so America's really like 50 countries. So it's not that Americans are not well traveled. They don't need to travel outside of the US. They can go to 50 countries and just drive there, right? And so I don't think we embrace that enough as Americans, that different states are very different
Mm-hmm.
cultures, and getting to see that. And I saw that, and you could appreciate this when I moved from New Jersey to Colorado, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but boy, was I a fish out of water, right? Do you remember one time we went, they said we went on a wagon ride in the mountains and they said we had to wear boots. And so I showed up in boots and they had 3 4-inch stilettos on them. And the guy is looking at me and he's like, lady, you were supposed to wear boots. And I was like, I am wearing boots.
What I remember most was you would be like, people wear, why is everybody wearing jeans? Because it would be like semi-formal. And when you're in
Yeah.
Colorado, that's like jeans and a blouse. And you're like, jeans aren't formal. What's going on?
Yes. I had all black. I only dressed in all black. And people would ask me, they were like, "Oh, are you coming from a funeral?"
Oh my
Like,
gosh.
I'm like, "What,
Hilarious.
people wear other colors?
So
Why?
funny.
Black is the standard New Jersey outfit. What are you talking about?" Yeah. Um,
Hilarious. I did want to bring up one more thing. You had talked about like what's a tiny step, like tiny steps in the right direction. I don't know if you're familiar with the book Atomic Habits,
oh, I love that
but
book.
if you haven't, Atomic Habits is a great book that said exactly what you just said. It's all about like decide what your passion is and make tiny steps towards it.
Yeah, and just it's working with women my whole life, it's sad to me when I see people who they want to try something, they have a dream, but they're just so afraid. They're so
Yeah.
afraid of the what if. And
Hmm.
so I have always been, I'd rather know and be able to go, okay, that's not for me, than wonder and have the what if, you know? And as I think as we get older, we look back and we go more like, okay, where could I have said what if? Or what if I had done this instead? Where would the whole projection of my life change? So thank you for being here today. Do you have an Instagram where people can kind of follow your travels, or where can they, if people are like, hey, I just want to kind of follow you, where can they do that?
We do have an Instagram, and it's for our cats. Because one thing
Oh,
I did not say is that we travel with cats, two
that's right.
cats.
I've seen the cats.
That's right. And so the Instagram is at Adventures with Rampage, um, because we left them for about a month when they were young. Now, not by themselves. Somebody came in and watched them every once in a while at the house before we sold our house, and they tore that house up. We called them Team Rampage. We got home from that trip. We were like, what happened to these blinds? So they're called Team Rampage. They're a little over a year old. And so we have an Instagram page for them. And actually, we're branded, and we just set up a YouTube channel, I guess, but we haven't done anything with it yet.
All
So
right.
right now it's Instagram, and it's Adventures with Rampage. Um, our little brand is an Airstream with a cat sitting on the roof and a cat sitting in the window, which is perfect because one of our cats hates the outside and the other one loves it. So that's
Uh,
the best place right now. And then once we get our YouTube channel up and going, we'll also obviously add that to the Instagram page.
and we'll put this guys in the show notes so you'll be able to find it. Well, thank you so much for being here. I know you need to get back to work. It looks absolutely gorgeous where you are. If you guys are listening,
It
she's
is
in this
pretty.
beautiful behind her, like mountains and trees, and it
I
just
can tell.
looks amazing and like super clear. And you can see the other campers behind her. And so, yeah, very cool.
That's our camper right
So,
there, the silver one.
okay, so you guys can see that's where she's living. Well, if you make your way out to the East Coast, come let me know. I will come visit you.
We
That would
are.
be
We
fantastic.
are.
So
We definitely
keep
are.
me posted. And guys, thank you again for listening to our episode. So if you liked today, then I hope you subscribe. If you'd love to leave a review, if you loved it, again, if you didn't love it, it's okay. No review needed. But join us next time because we'll have another interesting person with another irrelevant conversation. Why? Because life is worth laughing at. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.